Hello, everyone, and welcome back to NC Sports at ncnewsonline.com and our YouTube channel. I'm Ron Poniewasz, Newcastle News Sports Editor, joined by Newcastle News Sports writer Cody W. Pattison, and he says hello. Cody, we're here today to talk about high school baseball, and then in the second segment, we will talk softball as we just finished up the coverage of the WPIL and District 10 baseball and softball teams for this season. How about baseball? Eight schools. And we have 8 schools for softball as well. First off, we're going to go in alphabetical order, and I'm going to throw at you Elwood City Lincoln first, which was 3-9 in Section 1-3A, 6-13 overall. They got a nice piece to build around with Jordan Keller. He's a freshman catcher, so that's who they're going to build around. And you know, no matter who I talk to this year for coaches, they never dismissed Elwood City. They always said, hey, they're much better than their record.
It's nothing to dismiss them. It's more the fact that they're in Section 1-3A, and what also has been thrown around a lot is that is one of the toughest sections in the Whitfield. You got Mohawk, Shenango, Neshannock bumped up, and the undefeated and champs Riverside.
Yeah, and Elwood City's one of their 3 section wins was at home against Neshannock, and Neshannock went on to play in the WPIL championship game. So that kind of validates their standing there as a good baseball team. Much better than their record anyways. Laurel 7-7 in Section 2A, 7-11 overall. They won their last 4 in a row to end the season. You know, much more respectable. Cody, just your thoughts on where this Laurel team sits right now. You know, that 4-game winning streak a bit deceiving.
I wouldn't say deceiving. It's more of Jason Burke's first time as the head coach this year, trying to get his footing. You know, obviously he's had great mentors and Mike Kirkwood, Bill Sanders, and also he was coached by Gene DeGennaro, who stepped down.
Right. Mohawk was 7-5 in Section 1-3A and 13-8 this year. However, they're kind of like the basketball team. If you remember, the baseball team was really good and a juggernaut and ranked really high. Then all of a sudden, now they lost 6 of their last 7, 3 by 1 run, 1 game by 2 runs. They lost to East Allegheny 5-4 in the district quarterfinals, and that was a game that they led, I believe, going to the 6th inning. So kind of like the basketball team, you know, Jekyll and Hyde. Which is the right team? Which is the true Mohawk?
It's funny because, you know, like you mentioned, that momentum was great at the beginning, and then it just didn't fall in their favor. And even Nick Mariano said, you know, maybe, you know, this is what we need, and, you know, we'll be surprised with it. Obviously, they got kicked out in the quarterfinals after surviving a tumultuous first-round playoff game against Greensburg-Salem. So
Right. Just your thoughts on you know, what they need to do to turn things around next year and finish things off. You know, build off of that good start.
I mean, obviously, you just have to, you know, check your prospects, who's coming up also, and, you know, a lot of younger players are coming up, and baseball and softball is really building in that aspect. You just have to learn to give and take with that. And obviously, like they said, you know, Jekyll and Hyde, but what are you going to do? You know, sometimes that's how baseball ends up.
Neshannock was 8-4 in Section 1-3A, 18-6 overall. Lost in the WPIL championship game to Riverside, 6-1, and then they lost in the first round to Punxsutawney, 9-1. Again, another year where the Lancers, good baseball team, but maybe they overachieved a little bit. You know, they had a lot of injuries, found a way to overcome them. Seemed like they played every single game in extra innings somehow, some way. You know, just your thoughts on Neshannock.
Injuries plague them. It seems like that also happened with them last season as well with certain players. And then you have, like you said, extra innings. They could write a survival guide on extra innings. Just go in there. And obviously, they've had to go up against Riverside in that championship, and they were not giving them any extra innings at all in that one.
No. Newcastle, one of the teams that did not make the playoffs. Newcastle was 2-8 in Section 3-5A. That's a very difficult section. 5-10 overall. Anthony Miller graduates, and he's going to Notre Dame. So naturally, that was their piece to kind of work around, and he's going to be gone. How do they build off of him? How do they replace him?
Honestly, I don't think it's just one player that they have to focus on. I've said it a ton of times with you. The Newcastle baseball team that went from highest to highs to lowest of lows. And really, even Coach Bill Cook told me that their biggest opponent right now is themselves.
Yep. Shenango, Larry Kelly's crew. 8-4 in Section 1-3A, 9-9 overall. And let me state this first. These records are pulled from the Post-Gazette, which are official. And if the records are incorrect, well, it's because the coach did not fully report their games. So again, Shenango 8-4 in Section 1-3A, 9-9 overall. They lost to Avonworth in the WPIL quarterfinals, 9-2. And years from now, we're going to look at that score and say, boy, they got blown out in that game. Actually, they were winning going into the 6th inning, and the wheels fell off in that game. You'd never know it by looking at the score 9-2, but they were in that game.
It's kind of funny because Mohawk and Shenango in the same section, but it seemed like they switched season-wise. Their momentum was great heading into the playoffs, and then they go to Shaler that first round, and they knock off South Park, which were the Whitfield champions last season. And then it's kind of deja vu. Larry Kelly goes to Nick Mariano after the first round, says, "We'll see you in the finals." And then both teams go back to Shaler. It seems like Larry dragged them down with him out. Maybe some bad luck there, and they both lost in the quarterfinals there.
Hey, maybe they went to Washington and pulled for Riverside. You never know. Hey, maybe they proved us all wrong. Maybe they did see each other in the finals. I tell you what, Zach Herb was quite a pitcher for Shenango. Yes. What a joy to watch. You saw him up close and personal. I saw him on stream a couple times. They had Braden Ziegler, another talent. They're going to have to replace these kids, and it's not going to be easy. Any thoughts on that?
No, that's just a challenge in itself. Obviously building up new players and seeing what you got, like I mentioned before, with prospects coming up. So Larry Kelly will have to keep his eagle eye out for new pitchers and new catchers, because that's a hard role to fill, especially with Ziegler in that catcher position.
Maybe you have to hit the recruiting trail. Throw a rope a little bit bigger around a county other than Lawrence County. What do you think?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? So.
All right, Union 12-0 in 2-1A, Section 2-1A, and 14-6 overall. A really good Scotties team. They beat Rochester in the consolation game 4-0, and they lost to West Middlesex in the state playoff opener 12-2. Rocco Galmarini was incredible in that consolation game. On his game, he started the state playoff game. He either didn't have it, or West Middlesex is a heck of a ball club, because West Middlesex really dominated them in that game. But Rocco Galmarini was tough all year. 8-2, I believe, is his overall record for the Scotties.
A freshman too, I believe. So they have a little wiggle room there for the upcoming years. Great to get that consolation and get into the states, and obviously it's cut short by West Middlesex. But it's just rebuilding right now, especially with Rocco as kind of that centerpiece.
Yep. And Wilmington over in District 10 finished 14-7. They lost to Lakeview in the District 10 Class 2A semifinals 6-2. And Cody, their pitcher, I believe Hunter Jones, he threw a no-hitter in a 6-2 loss. Imagine being a pitcher throwing a no-hitter in any game, regular season or postseason, and then when somebody tells you, your team really wasn't close, they lost by 4 runs, and it'd be hard to fathom just how he could do that. But he was on his game that day.
I believe the coach on the other team said, maybe like a 1-0 no-hitter, win or something. But 6-2, that's pretty odd in itself. So that might be an odds and ends right down the line if I need to talk about that anymore.
Right.
About no-hitters.
Absolutely. Errors cost them. Walks cost them. It's a shame that they lost a game like that and wasted a no-hitter, because they had 2 runs to work with. It wasn't like they got blanked and they had no runs to work with. They actually scratched 2 runs across. So another good year for James Jeremita's team, Wilmington High. Any other predominant thoughts from District 7 and District 10 baseball?
It was a good year for baseball, especially, I believe, Section 3A. That's the real meat of Lawrence County right there. You don't just get good baseball, you get Lawrence County rivalries and just great all-around games to watch.
Pitching dominates certainly at the high school level. We've had a lot of great baseball pitchers to watch, and we touched on many of them just now. So we're going to take a break. We have softball to talk about, and we'll do that next, right here on NC Sports at ncnewsonline.com and the YouTube channel.
There's one thing I learned growing up around here. People should look out for each other, be friends and neighbors that you can count on. So it bothers me when people who are hurt in automobile accidents get bullied by the insurance company. I don't let bullies run over my clients. I do what I was taught growing up. Step up, stand up, and speak up for those who can't. I'm Larry Kelly, and I'm a Newcastle guy.
Okay, we're back with you here to talk softball around the county. First off, Elwood City Lincoln, 6-4 in Section 2-3A and 11-6 overall. They lost to York in the first round, 11-5. They lose 2 players. One of them is Aaliyah Garraway, and that's going to be a big loss for the Lady Wolverines. But the team overall is young, so that's a good plus for Gary Rosansky's team.
I thought it was funny, yeah, Section 2-3A, they get in there right at the, qualifying to go to playoffs, and the other 3 teams are deadlocked at 7-3 records. They go against York, who also has a 7-3 record, knocks them out.
Yeah, yep. All right, here's a good team to talk about. Laurel, plenty to talk about with Laurel. 10-2 in Section 1-2A, 16-4 overall. They lost to Neshannock in the WPIL championship game, 12-2. They lost to Everett in the PIAA opener, 15-12. In that game, Laurel led 7-1 early on, and then literally the next half inning, Everett decides to erase that and go up 9-7. So that was a topsy-turvy game. You lose 7 girls to graduation, including Alexandra Hurd, Georgia Jellyman, Grace Kissick, Madison Main, Abby Miles, Vanessa Miller, Grace Zeppelin. So there's a lot of talent that Frank Duddy's going to have to replace next year.
It was funny at the beginning of the season. I talked with Coach Duddy, and I asked him about how many seniors he has on the roster and how he's going to be losing his players. And he goes, "This is the biggest graduating class he's seen in a really long time." And obviously you mentioned Neshannock, and they went with silver after that in the Whitfield Championship, and that Neshannock is that big obstacle, that big hurdle that Laurel just can't get over yet. And they're trying, and I would have thought that you would see them a 4th time in the state playoffs, but Everett didn't allow that to happen.
You got to wonder if those kids or even the coaching staff sits there and says, I wonder what if we played in 3A, or of course if you played in 1A you'd be dealing with Union, and that'd be another county school, but you'd have to wonder, are they sitting there saying, geez, how would we do in 3A? Because they run up against Neshannock 2 years in a row, and then this year with an undefeated Everett. That might be something that they think about years down the road.
Maybe. I mean, if I was a coach, in my personal opinion, I'd be like, I want to get over this obstacle in the shank. Just say you can do it and then move on to brighter pastures.
Yeah. Okay, Mohawk 7-3 in Section 2-3A and 12-5 overall. They won their last 7 regular season games. However, they lost to Burrell in the WPIL quarterfinals 5-1, and Burrell was pretty good. Mohawk really put it together at the right time. Coaches are always saying you don't want to peak early. You want to be playing your best ball going into the playoffs. Winning 7 in a row going to the postseason, that's playing your best ball. Yeah,
7-win streak into the playoffs. Obviously, that is peaking at the right time. But you hit the quarterfinals with Burrell, and you just like they say, softball, you never know.
Yep. Neshannock goes 12-0 in Section 1-2A. They were in the same section as Laurel. 22-1 overall. They beat Laurel for the WPIL title 12-2. They lost to Everett in the state semifinals 9-6. Cody, before I finish off that thought, that was 6-6. And I think Neshannock had, was it first and second or second and third with no outs in that inning? Was it first and second possibly against Everett?
I believe so.
Yeah. What happened? I was sitting there thinking, okay, when I toggle back to it the next time, it's going to be probably a 3-run lead for Neshannock, and next thing I know, Everett's got action on the bases, and it's still 6-6.
It just they weren't mentally there. It felt like there was passes to second base for a pickoff that no one was even around to get. A tag out made by Addie Fry at the home plate, throwing it to get somebody out. No one was there. Just mental errors, and even Jackie Lash said, in the warm-up they didn't look themselves and they weren't as focused, and maybe that was just mental errors right there that cost them.
So this Everett team that went undefeated could have lost to Laurel down 6 runs early, could have lost to Neshannock if Neshannock gets a little bit of clutch hitting there with a 6-6 tie. Is Everett everything that everybody claims they are, undefeated and as good as they are? I mean, they did beat Laurel and Neshannock both by 3 runs, although they probably could have lost to either one of them or both of them.
Ask them with that state title around their neck.
Yeah, absolutely. So Neshannock's 48-game win streak is by the boards. They lose a couple key players in Hunter Newman and Erilyn Noge, among others, Division I players. Last year they had to replace Nalia Noge. She was the only player that graduated last year, and she went to Fordham, a Division I school. This year they lose two Division I players. Do we expect Neshannock to just keep building? I mean, they have that junior varsity talent, and then the younger kids coming up, they can replace it. It's tough to replace Division I talent, though.
Well, it's a deep bench that they have coming up too. And, you know, Jackie Lash, she started tournaments because not just Neshannock, Mohawk, Union, and Laurel, they all have deep benches coming up. So they're probably just going to build off of that.
Yeah, I expect them to be right back in the same spot, and it's going to be a good game next year when they play Everett. I expect them to run into them again. All right, Newcastle 1-9 in Section 3 5A, 6-14 overall, no playoffs. They did hit the ball, you know, quite a bit this year. You know, every game it seemed like somebody was hitting a home run or a triple or something like that, but the wins just weren't there, Cody.
You put up big stats, you put up big bats, it still doesn't matter if it's a loss at the end of the day.
Right. Shenango 6-6 in Section 1 2A, 7-9 overall. Amy Delaney back in charge of the Shenango program, got them back to the playoffs this year. Lost Our Lady of the Sacred Heart in the WPIL opener 6-5, so they were right there. They were right in that game. You know what? Kennedy Lynn is a freshman pitcher on that team. She's a good pitcher, you know, and just like baseball, pitching is the way to go to win games on the diamond, and they're set.
You can build off that freshman, but also give credit to the senior leadership as well. You got multi-sport athletes like Ashley DeCarbo, Janie Natal, Masano, and Jaco, just, you know, helping lead that, and Olsha obviously kind of ended things early for them in that first round.
Union 12-0 in Section 1-1A, 20-4 overall. They beat Carmichael's for the WPIL championship 10-8, lost to Tri-Valley in the state championship 6-3, and they lose Ella Casalandra, among others. I think there was two losses to graduation. Ella Casalandra is a very good player. It's going to be tough to replace her, but when you've got all those players, all those pieces coming back, Amia Pruz and Olivia Benedict, Addie Nogue, and the list goes on, Doug Fisher's going to be set for next year and beyond.
It is all about the U, and Doug Fisher is always happy to remind me that he has his daughter coming up, and he told me that he believes around 8 new kids coming up into the program. Look very good, so obviously they're just going to build on that. Like I said, deep benches for, you know, Mohawk, Union, Neshannock, and such, so obviously they're going to be right back where they were, if not, you know, gold next time around.
Yeah, and Wilmington in District 10, 16-3 overall. They lost 7-5 to Seneca, a heartbreaking loss in the District 10 semifinals. I think everybody expected a lot more from the Lady Greyhounds. They had a really good regular season and just didn't get it done that day. Scored probably enough runs to win. They just were a little bit uncharacteristic with the pitching and defense against Seneca. You know, the Lady Greyhounds will lose 5 players to graduation, among them Maylee Whiting, Chloe Crayrup, Faith Jones, Paige Peterson, Malia Bainey. You know, Faith Jones and Paige Peterson alone are big losses for them.
But they still have Ava Williamson, who is their ace pitcher. She always has great showing, you know, in the circle. Also, it's funny, they had a 5-2 lead after 4 innings in that semifinal game, and that just kind of went up in smoke, say the least.
Yep. Random topic here is you and I have both touched on this for softball. The junior varsity aspect of it. You have teams like Union loaded with numbers. Neshannock, which Jackie Lash started that program of junior varsity in the tournaments and for the lower levels. Laurel is loaded with numbers. I think Mohawk is also. Basically, if you don't have a good feeder system at the lower levels and you don't have those numbers and that talent, especially the talent, you're just not going to be a successful program, and that's why these teams are successful. They have those numbers. Agree, disagree?
Oh, I agree. And it also does, you got to look at little aspects too, where you can focus mainly on your starters, and you have that big, you know, pool of JV players that can help out in practices, and they always get credit for that when you talk about the underclassmen and stuff like that on teams.
All right, that's what we got around the diamond. That's how we recap the 2023 season for baseball and softball. He's Cody W. Pattison, sports writer at the Newcastle News, and I am Ron Poniewasz, Newcastle News sports editor. And we thank you for joining us here. We will have a segment with Larry Kelly, so don't go away.
Growing up here was great. As a kid, you always felt safe and secure. Just about the only thing I didn't like growing up were bullies, especially when they picked on somebody smaller. That's why, as an attorney, I decided early on that I was going to fight for those people who couldn't fight for themselves. I could have gone to Pittsburgh and worked for the insurance companies, but to me, that would have been like siding with the bullies. And that's just not who I am. I'm Larry Kelly, and this is where I'm from.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our baseball and softball podcast. Hey, this is a first for us, so we're planting the seeds of spring sports. So I guess we can call it the Diamond with Professor Larry Kelly, the honorable mention Larry Kelly, and Ron Poniewasz here from the Newcastle News. Larry, good to see you.
Well, good to see you. You're speaking of our podcast, which for the last 2 years won a statewide second place designation and recognition. And this year we were honorable mention. I don't know about that. That doesn't make me real happy, but it is still an honor to be recognized in a statewide review of all podcasts in Pennsylvania with newspapers very similar to ours. So again, I'm just a bit part. You're the captain of the groove ship, and the director, of course, is Pete Sirianni. He's the director of the groove ship. So congratulations to you guys.
Yeah, and congratulations to you as well, Larry. Doing a good job as always. Let's talk about the Diamond. What's been going on the Diamond with baseball and softball? How about we start with baseball first? Naturally, Larry is the coach of the Shenango Varsity Wildcats baseball team, and this year it took a 8-4 record in Section 1-3A. Naturally, Riverside was the team to beat in section play, and district play, and state play, as we all know. But Larry, just assess what you saw from your team. Well, let's start there.
Well, we had what I consider a very good season. And the difference between a good season, Ronnie, and a special season, and I'm holding my fingers, so hopefully you can see them, is this close. I told my team at the end of the year, we were probably 3 plays away from sharing a section championship with Riverside. And but that's the difference between winning a section championship, which we did at Shenango 2 years in a row. We were back-to-back section champs, and finishing second this year in what was clearly the toughest section in WPIAL 3A. And the proof was in the pudding. Riverside and the Shannock played in the WPIAL championship game. So we had a good season, and it was almost special. But to have a special season, a few things got to go your way. And as I said, we were about 3 plays away from a special season. But I'm proud of my guys. My senior leadership was really exquisite. I always say, you show me your leaders and I will show you your team. And we had great senior leadership this year, with Zach Herb, Braden D'Angelo, Braden Ziegler, Hunter Lively, Nicky Dando. Those 5 guys were really special for us, had great years, and that's why we had success this year.
Yeah, you touched on the Shannock, which was 8-4 in league and 18-6 overall. They lost to Riverside in the WPIL championship game 6-1 and lost 1. And Larry, what did you see from Neshannock when you were going up against them head-to-head, or if you scouted them?
We played probably maybe the best game of the year against them. It was an 11-inning game that was nothing going into the 11th inning, or the 10th inning, I believe 10th inning it might have been, with their ace on the mound, Andrew Fry, tremendous pitcher, tremendous hitter, our ace on the mound, Zach Herb, nothing going into the 10th inning. And, again, I think it was the bottom of the 7th inning, we had a runner at third base, and Braden Ziegler hit a rocket, that the shortstop just barely got a glove on, and the ball falls right in front of him. And he made a great play to throw him out at first base. If that ball is 6 inches left, right, or higher, it's a base hit and we win the game. But the Shannock was very resilient. John Quilera does a great job. And those guys never give up. In the second game, I think we had them beat 4-0 in the first inning, and they came back and beat us. I think we might have been winning 6-2, 6-3 late in the game. And that's been their staple. That's what they did last year. That's what they did this year. They may be behind late in the game, but they're mentally tough, resilient kids. And, they had a great year. They got to the Whitfield Championship game again and just ran into a team that, quite frankly, was the best team in the state in 3A, and that was Riverside. And Riverside was a great team with, they had two aces, Ronnie Harper and the Lucarelli boy. They were outstanding. They had Hunter Garvin come in to close out games. And you talk about a team that was also resilient. They were behind as late as the fifth and sixth inning, 3 or 4 games this year where they came back to win. And that's just mental toughness. That's resilience. We had them down, I think, in the sixth inning in our game, the first game we played them, and they came back and got big hits and pitched big and filled it big to win. And that's why they were a worthy state champion. 25 wins in a row, Ronnie, is pretty special. 2 years ago, we won 21 games in a row. And to do that in baseball and to do that in high school, you got to be really good. But at the same time, you got to be a little bit fortunate. There's a little bit of luck in baseball, probably more so than in any game, where somebody hits a line drive and, they catch it and the next guy up hits one off the end of the bat and it falls for a double. So Riverside was good. I congratulate them. Coach Ole Astro in his 55th year. He had a juggernaut this year, and he played every card right and did everything that they needed to do to be a state champ. So, Section 3A. Listen, Mohawk, Nikki Mariano's the head coach there. Fabulous team this year. We had an extra inning game with them that I think went 10 or 11 innings. So somebody asked me, what was it like playing in our section? And I said it was the best section in the WPIL. Every game was a dogfight. And again, we had an extra inning game against Neshannock that went 10 or 11 innings. So they had a walk-off against us in the bottom of the 7th. We had an 11-inning game against Mohawk. In the second game, I think, was a 3-0 game. So great competition, great baseball. If you're a baseball fan, you enjoyed this year.
Larry, you touched on Mohawk there. We're going to connect the dots here. Because we do a basketball podcast, if you remember back in the basketball season, Mohawk lost at Neshannock in the section finale, I believe it was. And they were rolling up until that point. And then that triggered a losing streak. They lost that game. They lost the game, I think, right before the pairings or the night of the pairings. And then they won a game, I think, in the WPIL playoffs. And then they lost 2 or 3 games in that playback mode. The reason I mention that is the Mohawk baseball team, they were rolling this year. They were ranked high, good record. Then they lose 6 of their last 7, 3 of them by 1 run, 1 by 2 runs. And then in their last game that they lost was that game to East Allegheny, 5-4 in the quarterfinals. Is there something about, maybe in sports, maybe these kids need to get, I don't know if you can get mentally tougher, but maybe the seasons are too long, or I don't know, maybe they just weren't conditioned for the end of the season to keep their focus, because it happened in basketball and happened in baseball, and there's a lot of kids that played both of those sports.
Well, I mean, look, Mohawk, I'm going to talk about baseball, was a very good baseball team. I'm talking outstanding, and I'm sure when you come out with your all-star team, there's going to be a couple of their young men who are on that team. But Ronnie, the last 6 games they played, they had to play Riverside twice, who was 25-0. They had to play us twice, and we were a playoff team. Again, we finished 8-4, but could have been 11-1 in the section. And then they had to go into the playoffs and play really good teams we were lower seeds. So we're playing teams that were higher seeds than us. The game they lost, we played right after them in the playoffs, and we watched it. Couple bad breaks. I'm talking a couple bad breaks. A bloop that falls, a ground ball into the outfield that took a bad hop that went over the outfielder's glove. Like I said, the difference between winning and winning a championship is this. That's the difference right there. More so in baseball than maybe any other sport.
Good collection of talent that Mohawk has for sure. They'll be back, no doubt about that. Larry, let's talk about Laurel. And they're a 2A school, Section 2, 2A. I'm not sure. Did you guys get to square off against them in non-league action?
We played them. We did play them towards the end of the year. They were playing a lot of young guys, Ronnie. And let me tell you something. In high school sports, freshmen and sophomores don't beat juniors and seniors. It just doesn't happen very often. If it does happen, it's rare. And they played a lot of young guys. You know, Laurel, they were loaded the last 2 years before this past season, but they lost 5 or 6 really, really great players. We played them. They were in our section, you know, not this year, but the last 2 years. Those games were dogfights and really talented young men. But when you're playing freshmen and sophomores, which is what they were doing, you're not going to beat juniors and seniors. It's just not going to happen very often.
But then again, next year, they're going to have a little bit more experience because they closed this year with 4 straight wins. How does that help them going into next year?
Nothing succeeds like success. Baseball's a game of confidence, you know, and it's such a difficult game that, you know, when it's going bad, it's pretty tough to turn it around. But once it starts going good and you start developing confidence, the game gets a lot easier. It never gets real easy, but it gets easier. And if you believe you can, you will. If you believe you can't, you won't. And Laurel at the end of the year was playing good baseball. We played them at the end of the year, and it was a dogfight. It was a good game.
I know you played against Newcastle, and Nick Rogers hit a walk-off home run for Newcastle. Newcastle finishes 5-10 overall, 2-8 in Section 3, 5A. One of their key departures is going to be Anthony Miller as he graduates and is going on to Notre Dame. What did you see from Newcastle this year, and what do you expect from them in the future now that they lose one talent?
Again, well, I mean, they lost Anthony Miller, who was a great baseball player. I was up at Notre Dame over the weekend. I was going to call Anthony, have him give me a tour of the baseball field. But he was a great player, one of the best to come out of this area in a long, long time. But they, too, were playing young kids, you know, freshmen and sophomores in the starting lineup. You know, you're not going to win a lot of games when that happens. Not in the section they play in. You remember Newcastle's playing 5A, so they're playing the Montours of the world and the Blackhawks of the world, and those teams year in and year out are very good. But, you know, Coach Cook knows how to coach them up. As kids, as they tend to mature, you know, they'll win again. It was only 2 years ago they won a state championship. So don't count out my Red Hurricane ever. But they were young guys. You gotta have upperclassmen show you the way. You know, that's at the end of the day. I don't care what sport you're talking about. In high school athletics is what carries the day. Upperclassmen who've seen the movie before and who've experienced, you know, all of the big games before, who are now, you know, becoming grown men and put it all together, and that's how you win championships.
Union Scotty's 12-0 in Section 2, 1A. Larry, 14-6 overall. They beat Rochester in a consolation game 4-0. Rocco Galmarini had one heck of a performance in that game. They came right back in the state playoffs and lost 12-2 to West Middlesex, a very good West Middlesex team. Rocco pitched in that game and was knocked around a little bit and didn't last long, but he looked really sharp against Rochester, and I believe he finished the year with an 8-2 record. So that's very impressive.
Oh, sure. I mean, we played Union early in the season. You know, again, they played us tough. They didn't throw their ace that day, and we threw ours, so it makes it a little bit different. You know, we needed to get Zach Herb some innings because Zach didn't play the first couple games because of a basketball injury that he had. But again, you know, Lawrence County baseball has come a long way. I mean, you think about it. Just 2 years ago, we had 3 WPIAL champions: Shenango in 2A, Newcastle in 5A, Union in 1A. You know, that speaks volumes about the talent in Lawrence County. And Union, they just keep pumping them out. It's pretty special at Union right now. The U's got it going.
Yeah, Wilmington had a nice season, 14-7 in District 10. Had a tough way to end the season. They threw a no-hitter, did Wilmington. Hunter Jones threw a no-hitter, pitched 6 innings because they were the visiting team. So Lakeview did not need to bat in the 7th. Wilmington loses a game that they throw a no-hitter in 6-2. They gave up 6 runs, but did not give up a hit. They had a lot of walks, plenty of errors. That's a tough way to end a season, to saying on one hand, hey, we threw a no-hitter. You gave up 6 runs and lost by 4. That's a tough way.
It's a tough way to lose, but you can't. There's 2 things you can't do. You can't walk guys. There's no defense for a walk. You know, we have the 10 commandments of Shenango baseball. And number 9 is throw strikes and we'll be fine. And number 4 is give them 3 outs and they won't score. Baseball's a very symmetrical game, Ronnie. If you give them 3 outs, it's very difficult to score. If you give them 4, it becomes easier. And if you give them 5, the floodgates open. And we consider a walk like an extra out in an inning. So if you make an error, walk a guy or 2, floodgates open. So very symmetrical game. And it is a tough way to lose, but you got to throw the ball over the plate and you got to catch it.
Says here, number 7 is thou shalt not hit the opposing batter. That is number 7 on the Shenango.
Well, 10. No. Number 7 in our vernacular is get a bunt down, and Coach Urian feels like he's gone to heaven. Every once in a while, I'm not a big proponent of bunting. You know, I'm a sabermetrics guy, but there are times that you have to do it. And when you get a bunt down, it's normally in a big situation. And, you know, it's not as easy as it looks. And there's some players who are better at it than others. And a good coach knows who can get the bunt down and who can't. And no, you can't be hitting guys either. You got to throw it over the plate.
Yeah. And, you know, our last school that we did not talk about, we'll touch on them real briefly here. It's one of your section opponents is Elwood City, 3-9 in league play, 6-13 overall. They had a freshman catcher, Jordan Keller, very good player this year for the Wolverines. They gave teams fits. They beat Neshannock at home. Neshannock, again, we talked about Neshannock, how good they were. They were in games, just didn't win enough games to make the
playing
playoff.
Freshmen and sophomores. Chris Wise, another great coach. We have so many good coaches in our section. I mean, Coach Oleastro, 55 years, is the dean. But you got Chris Wise at Elwood City. Of course, you got John Quilero at Neshannock. You got Nick Mariano. Nicky, I coached him at Westminster. People don't know this, but Nicky, I think in his junior year, had the longest hitting streak in the country at, I want to say, 36 or 38 games. So Chris Wise is a great coach. Will Nardone, who was a sophomore, was their number 1 pitcher, and he's the guy that beat Neshannock 2-1. And if you can beat Neshannock 2-1, you can pitch. And again, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with, because as those young kids get older and more mature, they know how to play the game. Elwood plays it right, always has.
How much better would they be if Christian Lucarelli was an Elwood City student and not a Riverside student? As we know, it's crosstown team, so maybe he's a Riverside guy, but not by too much in terms of proximity. You know, what if he was a Elwood City kid? How much better would that make Elwood?
Well, let me tell you something. I mean, you got a kid that the game against us when he beat us, Duke University, who offered him a scholarship, was there. He was throwing 92 miles an hour. If you can bring it 92 in high school, you're special. And, you know, you would have one of the best pitchers in the league. You know, and he was one of those guys, along with my guy, Zach Herb, along with Andrew Fry from Neshannock. Yeah, you're going to split probably pretty much with every section opponent. And he was special. He was the guy that he threw 75 pitches on Monday and 100 more on Thursday. And that's very difficult to do, to come back on what amounted to 2 days rest and throw that many pitches. But he did it. And he could be something special. Again, he's been offered and I believe accepted a scholarship to play at Duke in the ACC. So that tells you everything you know about that young man.
Mm-hmm. Larry, let's transition over to softball, if we will. And Laurel, 10-2 in Section 1-2A, 16-4 overall. And for the last 2 years, they've owned everybody that had a school name other than Neshannock. And this year they lost to Neshannock twice, once to Everett. It's escaping me who the other team was that they lost to. But regardless, they lost to Neshannock in the WPIL championship game 12-2. And they lost to Everett in the first round of the state playoffs, 15-12. And as frustrating as that no-hitter might have been for Wilmington to lose that way, it's got to be frustrating for Laurel to know that I think after an inning and a half, you're up 7-1, and you're thinking, okay, we're up 6 runs. You know, if we can get 4 more runs here in the next 3 at-bats, what have you, it's a 5-inning game. We're going on. Next thing you know, the next half inning, Everett gets 8 runs and goes from 7-1 down to 9-7 ahead, and things just changed real quick.
That's baseball and that's softball. And again, you know, I bet if you look back at that inning, my guess is there was probably a walk or 2. There may have been an error or 2. There may have been a couple really solid hits, but there may have been a bloop or an infield single in there. You know, Joe starts going the other way, it's pretty tough to turn it around. That's why we talk all the time at Shenango. I want my kids to be mentally tough so that when things start going the other way, that, you know, you can hang in there and, for lack of a better word, stop the bleeding. You know, what ends up beating you more times than not are not necessarily physical errors, but mental errors. That you throw the ball to the wrong base, that you fail to hit a cutoff man, things like that tend to be really, really crucial, especially in close games and in playoff games where you're playing competition. Those teams are there for a reason. But Laurel softball, I mean, didn't they win 3 Whitfield championships in a row? And then now all of a sudden, Neshannock, I believe, has won the last 2. So it just goes to show you again the talent that we have in Lawrence County, both in girls softball and in baseball. There was a time when my daughters went to Riverside High School that Riverside was the king of the WPIAL, and I believe they had a run of 3 Whitfield championships in a row. So Elwood City has had a run. So there is so much talent in Lawrence County that it's really impressive. It really is impressive when you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Mohawk, 7-3 in Section 2-3A and 12-5 overall. The Lady Warriors won their last 7 regular season games. They got hot at the right time. You know, coaches always say, you know, you don't want to play your best right out of the chute. You want to be playing and peaking right as the playoffs are getting ready to start. And that's what they did. They won 7 in a row to close the regular season. They lost to Burrell in the WPIL quarterfinals 5-1. A very good Burrell team, Larry.
Well, sure. You know, I tell my team, you know, I would have loved to have had another shot at Riverside because we played them the first 2 section games of the year. And, you know, that was like the first week in April. And I told my guys after, you know, we got swept, I said, look, it's not important to be the best baseball team in the first week of April. We want to be playing our best baseball in the first 2 weeks of May. And I really believe that we were. I mean, we swept Mohawk, and that was a really good team. We beat a really good South Park team, and we had Avonworth on the ropes. They were the number 2 seed, and you know, again, you make an error to start an inning, and all of a sudden, you fail to hit a cutoff man, and it changes the complexion of the game. So, you know, we were right there again and again. I tell my guys all the time, the difference between winning and winning a championship, I'll hold my fingers once again. It's that. It could be 1 or 2 plays in a baseball game that if they go your way, you win. And if they don't, you know, you can't get it done.
Yeah. Neshannock, 12-0 in Section 1-2A, 22-1 overall. They beat Laurel for the championship in the WPIL 12-2. They lost to Everett in the state semifinals 9-6, and that cost them their 48-game win streak, which is believed to be by virtually everybody to be a WPIL record. You're going to lose Hunter Newman and Errol Lenoge, two Division I standouts. Last year's team went undefeated and won the state title and lost Nalia Noge, a Division I standout. And that was the only player they lost from last year. So, Larry, can this team afford to lose two Division I standouts and also Jaden Malaysia, who's going to play at Division III Westminster, and have enough young players to replace that?
Well, it's going to help that they got a young girl that's coming back named Addie Fry, who I believe is the best pitcher and best hitter in Western Pennsylvania. So it always starts on the mound. And the thing about women's softball, you can pitch every game, and it's not like what we have in baseball where, I got to pull my best pitcher out of the game once he gets to 100 pitches. And, this year, Braden D'Angelo, he would have been one of the best pitchers in the section. I'd have had the same kind of 1-2 punch that Riverside had. But unfortunately, Braden had an elbow injury. He couldn't pitch all year. And now all of a sudden, when it's crunch time, I'm bringing sophomores in to pitch. And that always doesn't seem to, again, work out, even though I had a couple of young kids, Danny DiPaolo and Joey Campoli, who stood tall many times for us. But Addie Fry is going to be the best hitter and the best pitcher probably in the league and maybe in Western Pennsylvania. So can they repeat? They sure can. They're well coached. They have a good feeder system, and 48 games in a row. That's special, my friend. That is really special.
Yeah, absolutely. She dominates from the circle. Good velocity, good command, all sorts of stuff. Newcastle 1-9 in Section 3-5A, 6-14 overall. They are your softball team that did not reach the WPIL playoffs this year, Newcastle. So what does the Lady Canes need to do to erase that from the memory bank?
Well, again, they were probably playing young players. I'm not familiar with their lineup. I know they're well coached. It's all about the players, Ronnie, and you got to have players who are committed. Baseball and softball has become a year-round sport. It's 10 months a year. We start swinging the bats the first week in February. Our season ends hopefully the first week in June, and then the kids go play summer league, and we'll play again in the fall. And that's the same way it is in softball. You have to get your reps in. You have to be committed. You have to work. And if you do, as you develop, you're going to get better. You're going to get better. It's all about the players. It is. I've been coaching a long time, and I've been, fortunate enough to be a part of Newcastle basketball and Shenango baseball. And if you ask Ralph Belundo, he'll tell you it's all about the players and their ability to perform. And I'll tell you the same thing in baseball. We won a Whitfield championship. Had nothing to do with Larry Kelly. It's all about the players, because at the end of the day, you put them out there and they get the job done for you.
Shenango 6-6, in 1-2A and 7-9 overall. Amy Delaney's back on the bench this year, coaching the Lady Wildcats, and she led them to the playoffs. They lost to Our Lady of the Sacred Heart in WPIO opener 6-5. So a very competitive game. And Larry, you talk about pitching. They are in the same section as Neshannock, and they have a very good pitcher in their own right in freshman Kennedy Lynn. She's going to develop into a pretty good pitcher as well.
Yeah, Amy did a really good job with the Shenango women this year. They're playing a lot of young kids, and it's all about pitching. And as this freshman develops and becomes more dominant, because that game, women's softball, is dominated from the circle, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. They work hard. They're out there in the same facility as we are, and we're on one end of the football field and they're on the other. And when it's 25 degrees outside, and those young ladies are working hard.
Yeah. You say it's all about the players, and some will say it's all about the U, Larry. It's all about union. And the Lady Scots 12-0 in Section 11A, 20-4 overall. They repeat as WPIL Class 1A champs, beat Carmichael's 10-8. And Doug Fisher had told me a few times that they didn't play their best in that game. So it's pretty special when you don't play your best and you still score 10 runs and win the game. And they advanced all the way to the program's first state championship game, losing to Tri-Valley 6-3. They lose 2 girls to graduation, most notably Ella Casalandra. Replace her, and you have a lot of talent coming back. They're going to be special again next year.
Yeah, you're bringing back 7 of the 9 starters, but again, you got to have somebody on the mound who can get it done for you. I mean, it's baseball and softball. It's all about the pitching. You know, I always said in the 7th game of the World Series, a casual fan, nobody asks who's playing center field today. All they want to know is who's pitching tonight. And that's where it's at. And, you know, whatever modest success I've had at Shenango has been due in large part to I've had studs on the mound. Tino Campoli, Zach Herb, Braden D'Angelo, Shane Cato. Those guys were special. And, you know, when you got special guys on the mound, your team can do special things. Even more so in women's softball. You know, that game is totally dominated by what's happening on the mound. You know, my daughters used to play. I watched it a lot. I love the game. It's a great game, but it starts and ends on the mound. If you can find that player to be, you know, to do the job, they're going to be really, really good.
Yeah, it starts and ends on the mound in baseball, and it starts and ends in the circle in softball. There's a difference.
Yes. No, there's absolutely a difference. My daughters played women's softball. I call it women's because, you know, I was corrected one time when I was talking about basketball. Somebody told me it's not girls basketball, it's women's basketball. So I always refer to it as women's softball. But you're right. It's the circle, and you better get it done there. And that game, oftentimes, when you get to the really, really, it's unusual. I think Neshannock lost 10-6 to Everett. What was the final when they lost?
9-6.
9-6. Unusual for 2 quality teams to score that many runs. That's highly unusual. You know, normally when you get to those late games in the playoff runs, they're 2-1 games normally.
Yeah, 2 head scratchers. Both of our local teams lost by 3 runs to that Everett team. Both of our local teams, by rights, you could make a huge case and a legitimate case for them to beat Everett. And for whatever reason, just the ball just didn't go their way. The hits didn't come when they needed to, and the defense didn't hold up the way it needed to.
One and done baseball, Ronnie, anything can happen in a one and done game. You know, I've always said when you get to the WPIAL final, when you get to the state final, should be best of 3. Heck, when I played in Little League, when I played in Pony League, the championships were best of 3 because now you got to have depth in your pitching staff. You know, one and done, anything can happen. And, you know, in retrospect, when we beat Seton LaSalle, maybe if we'd have played them in a 3-game series, it wouldn't have happened. But conversely, when we lost in a state championship game, I'm convinced had we played them in a 3-game series, you know, we'd have won it. So I like to think that at some point in time, the WPIL and the PIAA, when you get to those championship games, play it over a weekend, play a 3-game series. That would be great baseball.
Okay, you just addressed it. I was just going to ask you, it's an interesting point to be played in a series. Were you talking about a series one right after the next? Game 1, it ends, half hour between game 2, and if there's a game 3, half hour after that, or game 1 on a...
Well, I don't think you'd play all 3 in the same day. I think you would play it over the weekend. I mean, you could literally do a Friday, Saturday, play a doubleheader on Friday and a single game on Saturday. You could do that if necessary. When I coached at Westminster, we did that all the time, you know, where you would play a 3-game series, doubleheader, one on a Friday and a single game on a Saturday, and then Sunday if there was a rainout. But I think that would make for great baseball. It would be very, very exciting for the fans. And I think you'd have a true champion. baseball isn't meant to be a one and done sport. It's about the ability to play a series and have enough depth in your pitching. Takes a little bit of the luck out of the game. Again, you can hit a line drive in baseball and it's an out. Next guy I pitch one off the end of the bat and it's a double. But over the course of a series, those tend to even out.
Yeah.
And
well, if so you're saying 2 in one day and then 1 the next. Would you say the reason they don't do that, or at least one of the reasons they don't do that, is travel and expense? Is that for a school? Is that what?
Well, I think you would only be doing in the Whitfield. It's not a big deal. I mean, everybody's taking a bus to the game. To play a doubleheader on a Friday and a single game Saturday, and if you need a rainout day, play it Sunday. I don't think travel would be a big issue there. Now, for a state game, championship game, it may be an issue. When we played in the state championship game 2 years ago, we had to stay overnight. And, that's an expense for the school district. But the WPL, there were a lot of fans at those games. And I know some of that money is paid back to the school district. So it would help defer some of the costs.
Yeah. Okay, 2 more schools, Larry. We'll touch on them real quick here as we're running along. Wilmington 16-3 overall. They lost 7-5 to Seneca in the District 10 semifinals. John Frank's team, every bit of their record of 16-2 up to that point. They had a 5-2 lead and let it get away, Larry. They didn't play Lady Greyhound softball, and they lose 5 players, and some of them are key players: Faith Jones and Paige Peterson, in addition to Chloe Crayrup. Those are big time players.
It depends who's coming up in the pipeline. In the really good programs, the difference between the starter and the reserve is very little. And as the reserve, who might be a sophomore or a junior, develops, they might be able to fill that spot. But it doesn't always happen that way in a small school. You got a kid who's a starter, and the reserve may be a 9th grader who needs another year or 2 to develop into the type of player that you need to win a championship.
Sure. And Elwood City went 6-4 in Section 2, 3A and 11-6 overall. They lost to York in the first round, 11-5. They lose a couple of girls to graduation, most notably Aaliyah Garraway. But Coach Gary Rosansky told me, hey, we're young, so if they can, find a piece to put in there to fill that hole in the lineup of Aaliyah Garraway, look for Elwood City to be back next year.
Elwood City has pedigree and a culture. They have had a winning softball program for years and years and years. And I'm familiar with their feeder program because when my daughters were at Riverside, we used to play them. It is a tremendous feeder program where the young women coming up through the system are coached up and developed. And by the time they get to high school, they're ready to go.
Yep. All right, Larry. Hey, what a great couple of segments here on, I guess we'll call it Diamond. We're planting the seeds of a spring sports podcast. How about that?
I think that'd be a good idea. My guys ask about it all the time. They say, hey, Coach, I know you do one for football, which you know very little about. You do one for basketball that you pretend to know a little about. Maybe you know a little more about baseball. We should be talking about it more. I think that would be a great idea. I think it would be something that our viewers would really appreciate because, again, the baseball talent in Lawrence County, Ronnie, is special. And I can't wait to see you put that all-star team together, man. We had some great players this year in that Section 3A that we played in. And unfortunately for me, many of them are coming back. So I got to look at them again next year. But that's okay. I got a few horses coming back too. So we'll see how it shakes out. And, I'll be looking forward to it.
All right, Larry. Hey, congratulations on your season. Very special. For you guys to go 9-9. They granted it was 500.
I'm going to stop you. You keep saying that. Our record was 13-9, and I don't know how you guys missed it. I know the Post-Gazette had us 9-9, but half the time they would call me, and half the time I would call them and report the score, and it would never show up. So I can assure you our record was 13-9. If anybody knows, it's me, the head coach, because I enjoyed every victory and I lost sleep over every defeat.
They are our official source for wins and losses. They are the WPIL's official source for their standings that they put in the championship program. So when we do write-ups, if they say 9-9, you're 9-9. That's your job. Your job, honorable mention, to call the paper and do your duty and report the games, win or lose.
Well, as I said, I kind of get happy and have a nice meal after we win. And I did that 13 times. And I can point to the 9 times in the calendar when I didn't sleep after we lost. So with all due respect to my brethren at the Post-Gazette, they didn't get it right this time. But that's okay. It really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, Shenango baseball is in it to win championships. And we didn't quite get it done this year. It was a good year, just wasn't special. But the difference between good and special for the last time, Ronnie, is this. 3 plays. So
if you were playing a drinking game and you were doing this to the drinking game, you might be passed out by now.
That's true. I'm a 2-beer guy. After that, I'm done.
Okay.
But I enjoyed it. We got to give some thought to doing a podcast. We'll bring on the coaches from the Connie, Johnny Q and Nikki Mariano. They're never short on things to say. So we could get some good discussions going.
All right, Coach. Very good. I will see you in a couple months when we talk football. So, brush up on your gridiron, your knowledge. And we're going to attack honorable mention and turn that into first place.
Yeah, I didn't like that. We were this, I'm going to do it one more time. We were this close. I don't even like second place in the state, which we won twice. I want to be first place. I want to win it all.
You could do that all you want. The person's already passed out on the floor. They've already tapped out to that.
But I enjoy it, my friend. Thank you for having me again. I truly enjoy it. And we'll be talking soon.
All right. He's Larry Kelly, a member of the Luxembourg, Garbett, Kelly & George law firm and the head baseball coach at Shenango High School. We appreciate him joining us and talking baseball and softball. Larry, thank you again. I'm Ron Poniewasz, Newcastle News Sports Editor. We'll see you soon, couple months, and we'll be talking football, everybody. So gear up.
Thanks, my friend. Talk soon.
Yep. Take care.